distribution. This is something that's used in statistics. It's in the GCSE statistics syllabus and also the S1 module of AS, and it's a distribution that's used generally for data where you expect there to be most of the data in the middle and some bits to the above and below the mean. Now this particular distribution, the normal distribution, is symmetrical about a mean right in the middle. So that's the first thing we're going to note on here, is that the mean mu, which I've talked about on the right hand side, is slap bang in the middle. And then as you go to the right and the left, this is 1 standard deviation above the mean, this is 2 standard deviations, and 3 standard deviations. And for a normal distribution, it's assumed that most of the data is either 3 standard deviations above or 3 standard deviations below. So we just add those on as well, down to 3 standard deviations below. We've got our general shape. Now you'll be required to understand the amount of data that's expected to be between these limits. So if we just take these sections here, between 1, 2 and 3 standard deviations above and below, then you'd be required to understand that this section here contains around about 34% of the data. To be exact, it's 34.1, but for GCSE stats questions in particular, it's rounded to a more convenient figure. This part here is 13.5%, which leaves us with our final section of 2.1% there and there. Now the actual numbers are 0.6, and as I said, 0.1 for these and 0.6 there. When you add these all up together, what you'll realise is that these are approximated to having 64% of the data, or sorry, 68% of the data is expected to be between 1 standard deviation above and below. If you go to 2 standard deviations above or below, roughly it's 95%, and you can see where this has been rounded down. And then finally, between 3 standard deviations above and below, you're expected to get 99.8%. And those are the numbers you'd need to know for your GCSE stats questions, and we'll look at those in a moment. What I want to do next is just have a look at a couple of distributions. So I'm going to take 2 tests where they've got a mean of 30 and a mean of 25, and for this notation the variance is put in, which is the standard deviation squared. So if the variance is 100, that means that the standard deviation is 10 for this one and 5 for this one. So we've got a mean of 30 and a standard deviation of 10, and a mean of 25 and a standard deviation of 5. And we've got a couple of questions we're going to try and have a look at. But before we do that, we just want to have a look at what these distributions look like. So that's them there, and if we just take them and put them into our notes, so we're going to have a little scribble on them. You'll be able to note that these 2 distributions are different shapes. This one is centered around 30 and this one is centered around 25, so you can tell that the red one is A and the blue one is B. You'll also notice that one's higher than the other, and actually the height of this one is half the height of this one, but this one is, the blue one is narrower, and the narrow one represents the smaller standard deviation and the wider one represents the larger standard deviation. The idea behind the normal curve is that the area underneath both curves should be exactly the same. Hence this one is wider and not as high, and this one is not as wide but twice as high. What we can do is start to answer a few questions, and if you watch the following video, have a look at how these questions can be answered using the information that we've had so far.